Hey guys, Mike Killen here. I'm a coach with WP Elevation, and I wanted to talk to you about how I deal with long-term mental health issues that are particularly prevalent within solopreneurs and small businesses. As small businesses, we're often alone, and we might find it hard to reach other communities. And on top of that, our industry, I think, tends to attract people who are more prevalent towards depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. I myself have had to deal with some pretty long-term mental health problems in general. So I wanted to share with you the tactics and strategies that I use to cope with what is frankly an ongoing battle. I think part of my persona is quite energetic and excitable, but that's actually been quite a long time to develop. My mental health problems started with coming off a long-term drug use, and it basically culminated in a quite deep depression, which actually manifested itself as anger a lot of the time. So I started counseling and I took antidepressants. Drugs aren't for everyone, I might say, but for me, they really, really helped. And it was all going relatively well until I was made redundant from a job, which kind of sent me into a bit of a spiral, which is actually when I started my business, which is probably not the smartest time to start a business when you feel pretty depressed about yourself. But it culminated in a series of things such as never getting out of bed, never being motivated. And I really wanted to share with you the tactics that I use to help me get over that and put myself in the position that I am in now, which I think is pretty positive. Most importantly, I think it's about recognizing the signals or the flares that might indicate that I'm about to take a bit of a dive. I'm happy to say that I don't use illegal drugs anymore, but I'm also not on antidepressants, but I was on them for quite a while. Also, counseling and therapy helped an enormous amount, but I have actually got 5 or 6 practical tactics that I think absolutely everyone can apply, regardless of whether you feel you're feeling mental health issues or actually just in general. I think they're pretty useful. Also, if you're watching this and you're the partner or the spouse or the relative of someone who does clearly have mental health issues, if they're running a small business, this might be useful for them to watch, because a lot of the tactics aren't necessarily kind of touchy-feely. They're pretty pragmatic, because I'm not really a touchy-feely guy. The first step is recognizing the symptoms. Now, the problem with this is that it's actually really hard often to tell the difference between what's just a bout of unmotivatedness and lethargy, maybe, and long-term depression. This can kind of manifest itself in a bunch of different ways, and it's almost impossible to know whether it's a short-term or a long-term thing. Ultimately, trained mental health professionals are probably going to be the ones who are going to help you out. But if someone has mentioned to you and said, hey, I think you're spending quite a lot of time in bed and you don't really go outside and your curtains are shut all the time, that might be an indication that you're suffering from a problem. The good news is that we now are moving, I still don't think we're perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we're moving towards a society that is able to deal with and help people with mental health, as opposed to kind of brushing them under the surface and just kind of ignoring it. So number one would be to recognize the symptoms. And that goes, again, if you are the spouse or the relative or the partner of someone, read up a little bit on what the symptoms are. Mine actually came out as antisocial disorders. That's actually how mine were picked up in the end, as I became almost borderline sociopathic, which was kind of the way it was coming off a drug and not really know how to cope with a few other things that were going on, and it kind of just switched. And I didn't think I was doing anything weird or wrong, but some other people kind of pointed out to me, particularly close people, and it was very hard for them. It was really hard for them to point out the actions that I've been doing weren't A, healthy, or B, even particularly pleasant to be around for them. Secondly, and this is probably the biggest thing, the biggest change, and it was the hardest one for me to accept, is routine. Having routine in your life and in your business and in your day-to-day and your month and your week is so, so, so important. I found that when I would kind of sense a depression dip coming on, it was usually because I was feeling overwhelmed. And as soon as I started keeping a diary of everything that I needed to do day to day, and a list of the things that I wanted to do, and made sure that I had appropriate time slots for those things, I found that a lot of my worries, I wouldn't necessarily say anxiety in the clinical sense of the term, but kind of my worries and fears would kind of dissipate because I knew what I was capable of doing. What it also did is show me that I had way too much on at one point, way too much on. And it allowed me to kind of go, this is not healthy for me, and I just physically am not able to do it. So I dropped it. And there was a big, big sense of relief from going, I don't need to do some of these activities, I'm just going to drop them. But having a sense of routine, knowing that I train at least twice a week, at 6 o'clock on a Monday and a Wednesday, every single week, no matter what, which kind of leads me on to my third point. Having a routine within your day-to-day about when you answer emails, when you get up, sticking to it. It's hard work, but sticking to it. I promise you that, to me, having a routine and having a structured day-to-day plan was the biggest change, and is probably the biggest coping mechanism that I've got at the moment. So number 3 is exercise, which is always funny to me because I never considered myself a particularly active guy, but now I'm doing more and more stuff, and there is clinical proven benefits to exercise, not just physically as in being healthier. The upsides of exercising regularly, even if it's light exercise, going outside, going for a walk, all the way up to running, training regularly, doing marathons, that kind of stuff, there's a huge flood of natural endorphins that are released into your brain, which can combat an enormous amount of the problems that we tend to feel. I don't think that there's a set reason why people become depressed. Sometimes it's a chemical imbalance, sometimes we're just hardwired and naturally inclined that way. Sometimes it's our own mental process that doesn't allow us to deal with certain things in what most people would consider a constructive way. But exercise, finding something that you like to do that gets your heart rate up, the benefits are demonstrable, and I would seriously recommend. You don't have to join a gym, you don't have to do anything expensive. Going for a walk, getting some fresh air, getting the heart rate up, massive benefits. That would be number 3. Number 4, and this is one of the hardest ones to do that I still struggle with, is to communicate, which is kind of where a lot of us fall short anyway when it comes to dealing with our own mental health. The first big one is, if you've got a bunch of problems and a bunch of worries and you think this is all going to spiral out of control, my partner calls it the hamster wheel. It just goes round and round and round and round and round in your head, but doesn't actually do anything. That can be exhausting. And sometimes we found that writing out a list of all the things that you're stressed about and then thinking, well, who could I communicate to about this, helps massively. Now, this is hard because sometimes we think that this is asking for help. We think that we're going to be a burden. What's interesting is the more help that I've asked for, the less help I've ended up needing. It kind of is this self-fulfilling cycle that works in a positive way. The more people you reach out to, the less you need to in future. That's tend to be what I've found. But all the way down to the practical aspects, if you're worried about money, which was a big part of my initial depression episodes was money worries, by talking to my bank, by talking to the people that I owed money to, debtors, companies, stuff like that, most of them were pretty receptive. No one really wants you to feel bad and lose sleep over money problems. But if you talk to people, 9 times out of 10, they're willing to help out. So that would be my 4th point, is to communicate. Okay, just write it out, write an email, talk to people. You'd be surprised about the responses you can get. And finally, number 5 would be positive surroundings, which is easier said than done, I think, because sometimes, for example, our friends and family aren't the most positive influences on our lives. I'm very lucky in that the people that I'm around most of the time are incredibly supportive and incredibly understanding, not just for the bad times, but also for the good times. They kind of want to propel me forward and help me out in that respect. But yeah, surrounding yourself in a positive environment not only means being a part of a community like WP Elevation that understands what you're going through, but also wants to see you do better. It also does occasionally mean cutting off contact with people who aren't healthy for you, which again is very, very hard. A lot of my friends just kind of wanted to get high and go out and get pissed, and that's not healthy. It wasn't healthy for me, it wasn't healthy for my business, it wasn't healthy for my state of mind, and to kind of cut them out of your life can be very, very tough. But on the other aspect, I actually believe that surrounding yourself with positive things is more important than eliminating negativity. So finding people that you want to be around, finding things that you want to be around. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a few cool books and, you know, little geeky items and stuff dotted around your room. Making sure that you're getting enough light as well. Ultimately, having a positive environment for you to be in is probably the biggest single contributing factor to your day-to-day mental health. So yeah, those are the 5 tactics that I use to combat my own mental health problems and long-term battles. To be honest, I'm in a pretty good state of mind at the moment, but we have had some close calls relatively recently, and those are the things that I literally use day to day in order to help me get through it, particularly as a small business owner. I'd love to hear the methods and tactics that you use below, or if there's anything from my list that you want to try out, let me know in the comments below, and I will speak to you later. Go elevate.